Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, I'm back today following the new patch release, which has brought along with it a raft of datamines. This has been the biggest datamine that the miners have ever found, at least as long as I can remember, so strap in. Datamines are always subject to change, but I know that some people aren't keen to see this kind of information ahead of time. If you're in that camp, you've been warned. This is the time to turn off the video. I thought I would preface this video with a comment that one of my chief dataminers left for me. It looks like the developers or programmers made an effort to put all of this datamine information away in a single folder, because the miners found all of this information in one place. I don't know what this means for the future, but it might mean that the programmers are taking a conscious effort to hide away this information, and datamines might be harder to find in the future. The information today looks to be pretty far ahead of time, so a lot of the abilities that I show you today are piecemeal, and there aren't full descriptions yet. Today, we have all of the World Eaters faction, the next Dark Angels character, the final AdMech character, the final Tyranid character, and also the first abilities for the next Guild Raid boss. Everything is timestamped as usual for you to skip ahead at your leisure. The first World Eater is Kharn the Betrayer, probably the World Eater that everyone is most excited for. Kharn has 3 traits: the World Eater's faction trait of Blessings of Khorne, which gives bonus damage and damage reduction based on the number of times the unit has been hit this battle. He also has Rapid Assault and Final Justice. He is a legendary unlock in the game files and therefore fits in with the theory that he will be a legendary release event. He only has a melee piercing attack at 4 hits, and his base movement is 3. His stats on screen are reflected at Diamond 3. His damage stat is fairly average, but is accompanied by high pierce ratio. Health and armor stats are also fairly average. We don't have complete descriptors for his abilities, but I've tried to rationalize them as best as I can based on the datamines. It looks like his active ability, Kill, Maim, Burn, does a melee pierce and chain attack, as well as having a ranged plasma attack. His passive ability, the Betrayer, has 4 piercing hits and also appears to have a damage reduction percentage that scales up when you level the ability. At level 50, the damage reduction is at 33%, and I wonder if this means that he will have a passive that damages nearby units and does 33% reduced damage to allies. The next World Eater is Tarvakh, who I have been told is a master of executions. I have to thank Draupnir for going over these with me and identifying the correct tabletop model equivalents. He is a rare unlock and has the Rapid Assault trait in addition to the World Eater's faction passive. His active ability, Murderous Swing, does piercing damage and also does extra damage, but it's not clear the conditions for this extra damage. His passive, Trophy Taker, looks like it gives him extra critical hit chance and damage. He has a single hit piercing melee attack to go along with a movement of 3. His damage stat is on the higher end, and he is only behind 5 or 6 characters in the game in terms of raw damage. His health and armor stats are only slightly on the higher end of average. Macer is the next World Eater and looks to be a Jakhal unit. He adds the Resilient trait to the faction passive. His active, Jakhal Stims, does a 4-hit physical attack. It mentions 25% health as part of the ability description, but it's not clear how this affects the ability or output. His passive, Skull Smasher, gives bonus damage and again mentions 10% HP. Macer has a 3-hit chain melee attack along with movement 3 and fairly average damage stats. His health is slightly on the higher side and accompanies his armor stat of 957 at Diamond 3, which is the lowest in the game, around the same level as Volk, who currently holds that unwanted title. The next World Eater is an 8-bound, currently called 8-bound in the files. It has so many traits that I can't even fit in that it is a rare unlock. Demon, Resilient, Terrifying, and Unstoppable accompany Blessings of Khorne. His active ability, Overwhelming Wrath, does piercing damage and also has some information about damage reduction, although again the conditions under which the damage reductions apply are not clear. His passive ability does bonus damage. There are no values here for the abilities, so I suspect this character is quite far away from release. The final World Eater is Wrask, the World Eater's Terminator, who is coming to the game later this month via Hero Release Event. I'm not going to give too much away here and sustain the excitement for another couple of days. I'll just tell you that his datamine suggests that he has a melee flame attack only and is a deep striking Terminator. I'll cover him in depth with gameplay footage a few days before his release event starts. It also looks like, based on the rarities we've seen thus far, that Kharn will be the only legendary character for this faction. Next up, we can see in the game files that the next Dark Angels character is Asmodai, the Dark Angels Interrogator Chaplain. There isn't a huge amount in the mines here on his abilities apart from ability names. Exemplar of Hate for the active and Feared Interrogator for the passive. He has the Terrifying trait, movement of 3, and melee power attack at 4 hits. The final Tyranid in the game files is the Parasite of Mortrex. The only trait that it has at the moment is Flying. Both the active and passive abilities are named. it itches, and barbed ovipositor. The Datamine text for both abilities is exactly the same, it just gives stats for summoned minions. Given the tabletop function of the model, I suspect that this unit will summon or at least involve Ripper Swarms in some capacity. It has a melee toxic attack and has damage on the higher side of things. Movement of 4 with flying is a treat. Health and armor stats are fairly middle of the pack. The last potentially playable unit that has been found in the Datamines is the last Adeptus Mechanicus unit. I have been told that this is a Kataphron Destroyer. It has the mechanical, heavy weapon, overwatch, and vehicle traits. Sygex is also an uncommon unlock, which would leave Vitruvius Danek as the only legendary of the Admech faction. It has a flame melee attack and a physical ranged attack at range 3 and 4 hits, which I believe is the first time we're seeing physical damage as a ranged attack in the game. In terms of abilities, Sentinel Directives deals damage, but we're not given more specifics than that. Heavy Grav Cannon deals bonus damage and gives extra pierce ratio, but again, nothing more specific than that. All we have from a stats point of view is a movement of 2. The very last thing to show you is what looks like some early work on the next guild boss. It looks like the Avatar of Khaine will be the next guild boss, and the 2 most fleshed out ability descriptions are shown on screen. I believe that the Wailing Doom is the giant sword that the Avatar wields, and tabletop players will know that melee weapons on tabletop have both the strike and sweep profiles. In this instance, it looks like each profile affects the type of area of effect damage that the Avatar of Khaine does, initially dealing flame damage to the affected hexes before doing melted damage on a subsequent turn if the unit remains there. The other abilities or traits are slightly harder to make sense of. It looks like it has an ability called Blood Runs, Anger Rises, War Calls that summons Aeldari Guardians, which will possibly be similar to what we're seeing in the same hand campaign at the moment. Molten Form gives him a 66% damage reduction, and given that the Avatar is a creature of fire, I would assume that it takes less damage from flame or melta attacks. That's all I've got for today, a bit piecemeal but also a lot of juicy stuff that should hopefully wet your lips in anticipation of stuff that is coming soon. If you are a player or knowledgeable about one of the characters found in the Datamine, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what the abilities might look like in-game. My next video should be next week on Wrask, the new World Eater's Terminator, so keep your eye out for that one. If you are a newer player who hasn't yet used their referral code, I would love if you could consider entering mine as shown on screen. It earns you 100 Blackstone and supports me in the work that I do. It is single use though, so choose who you support carefully. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!